Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat, coming to you here on this Tuesday. Chronic Hoosier joins us now. Chronic, how are you doing, man?
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you gentlemen as well.
That's right. We got the new year going. It started promptly with cold weather right off the bat.
Yeah, they slam shifted us right into this season, it seems like.
Yeah, I'm ready to warm it back up. Indiana basketball obviously did not get the result that I'm sure you'd like to have seen against Penn State.
That's probably an understatement. It's not just the result that the fans wanted to see, but likely a result this team really needed going, as they're trying to build a resume for Selection Sunday. And it's way, way, way too early in the season, to start making, sweeping statements that it's over or anything like that. But there is going to be a cumulative effect when you look at the games, the opportunities to win these games that Indiana squandered. As they start to stack up, it's just going to make the hill steeper and steeper to climb. And, right now it's one of those games that puts them, I would imagine, closer to the bubble. And it's obviously it's way, way early in the season, so who's to say how impactful it's going to be? But you certainly get the sense that, kind of like Syracuse, kind of like Wisconsin, one of those games looking back, you really fear Indiana may wish things had turned out differently.
They looked a little listless to me too, Chronic. They looked like they were like a step slow on loose balls. Obviously, the rebounds. You remember that one possession in the second half where it seemed like that they got every offensive rebound. That to me is concerning because this is supposed to be an effort program. You've got to be an effort program to make up for your lack of talent at certain spots, and they didn't show that on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think Woody acknowledged that in the post-game conference. He said that he felt like they came out flat, and it certainly looked like it. For this team to be able to compete, we saw it in the second half when they battled back from I think it was a 10-point deficit. Their defensive intensity has to be their constant. It has to be their foundation. And when it's not there, and even though they were playing decent defense, I mean, Penn State really only beat Indiana because they were able to knock down some three-pointers. I mean, quite honestly, that was the difference maker in the game.
11.
That and rebounding. But, Indiana you didn't get the sense that they were playing as aggressively as we've seen on the defensive side of the ball. And as a result, it wasn't generating a lot of offense for them. And, you continue to see an offense that can get bogged down relatively easily when it's not working for them inside in the post action they're trying to get going.
Well, in the season, I was talking for Indiana, January is going to be of just uber importance because now you've lost a road game that you absolutely needed and should have won, should have had. Now you've got number 13 Ohio State coming in. You've got a very good Minnesota team coming in. You have to go on the road to Iowa. Purdue is coming in. Michigan comes in. And Illinois all by February 5th. So to me, the entire season is going to be made or broken in the next month.
No, I think you're exactly right. It's certainly going to set the table for them. Right now, when you look at the resume, perhaps St. John's, I'm not sure what the net, how that rates them from a quad standpoint. They're a Ken Palm top 100 team. Notre Dame's a Ken Palm top 100 team. So, say they got 2 wins against, quality opponents. They got 3 losses against quality opponents. And other than that, I don't know that there's a whole lot else in the balance other than just fluff that they can really hang their hat on right now. So with each one of those games that, you could have, should have won, it just raises the stakes on the next one. I don't know whether or not Indiana is going to be a favorite against Ohio State. I doubt it. I think it's going to be a tight line. Pomeroy has it at 1, but you've got to look at the schedule going forward. You absolutely cannot spare any home losses. It just cannot happen. They have to hold serve. They have to hold home court, and they've got to start figuring out a way to steal some of these games that they're projected to lose. Because if it goes according to plan, at least according to the projections right now, Pomeroy has them finishing 10-10 in conference, 19-11 overall. That's not a position you want to be in come the selection Sunday. I don't think, and I think most fans agree. I think the program agrees. This is a season where they've got to find themselves into the tournament, just to establish some momentum, just to end the streak that they have going right now of tournament absences. For a coaching staff that's trying to rebuild a program, momentum's everything, perception's everything, and right now Indiana is probably just perceived as a rather mediocre team at this moment based off the results they posted so far.
Absolutely. Is Trey Galloway going to be available for Ohio State? Is he back yet?
Woody kind of hinted that way. I think he indicated that he expects to have him back game ready this week. So we'll see. And, as much as you would like to see the rotation contribute a little bit more, you see a staff that's probably going the opposite direction. It seems like Woody's shortening the rotation, shortening his bench. Barely gave his reserves hardly any minutes last game, with the exception, I think, of Finney, who pulled 24 minutes. Geronimo got 9. Tamar Bates saw 6 minutes. Michael Durr saw 5 minutes. Anthony Leal saw 5 minutes. And it's understandable. I don't think he got the juice off the bench that he was looking for that game, save for perhaps some plays from Geronimo. But that's, this is an Indiana women's basketball. You don't have a starting 5 that has the endurance or the skill to carry you for a full 50 or for a full 40 minutes right now. This team's got to find a way to get some more production from its bench. And quite frankly, it's got to find a way to get more consistent production from its backcourt. The one thing that stood out to me the most, I think, during that Penn State game, both teams had some roster turnover. Both teams had to reach into the transfer portal. They had a continuity of minutes from the prior season that was pretty close, low mid 40s from a percentage standpoint of how many minutes they returned. But what stood out to me, I think, the most was Penn State currently ranks 5th in the country in total roster experience, and they have the 5th amount, or the 5th highest amount of old heads on that roster. Indiana's in the, I think, 303, 302 in that category. And they just played like a more mature, experienced team. I don't think they've necessarily played like a more skilled basketball team, but they played like you would expect a team that had a lot more veterans to play in defending their home court. And one thing these guys have got to learn, I don't care who you're playing in the Big Ten, when you go on the road, you better expect an absolute gauntlet that you're going to have to run. Even in a paltrily attended gym with a generally lousy fan base, they've got to find a way to bring their own juice. And it's got to start on the defensive end, quite frankly.
And Harar gave Trace Jackson-Davis problems in that game. I mean, Trace scored 20, but he needed 50 points and only 5 rebounds. Harar had 12. The physical matchup with Trace and Harar was not good. And this is where Trace's inability to develop a perimeter game hurts, because all you're doing is parking him in the post. You're not drawing Harar out, and that's a problem.
No, it's very much a problem, and I think you see that reflected not just in the overall offensive efficiency, but in the effectiveness of the guards. I mean, how many times did you see players try to drive the lane, and it was just way too clogged, way too congested to get a good look, and often producing turnovers or generating bad shots because the spacing just isn't there right now, and they got to find a way to get back to that, because for an offense that's really as limited as what Indiana's running right now, spacing and ball movement are everything for them. And when you see the spacing compacted and the ball movement stagnate, that usually spells bad things for Indiana's offensive output.
Yeah, even with that loss, they only dropped to 31 in the Ken Palm, which was a little surprising. I saw someone said, Tim said their net ranking is now 48. So this has not killed them, but they have got to find some ways to make this up. But to me, I have not seen, I've said this earlier, I haven't seen a toughness from this team, Chronic. I haven't seen just really scrapping that they need to have to win a game, to put a team away. They just are not fighting yet to me.
No, and that killer instinct is something that's been absent from this team for some time. But again, that's kind of a product of leadership. At the end of the day, you've got to have some guys on the floor who are able and willing to lead by example with that toughness. You see that reflected in the loose balls. You see that reflected, quite honestly, in the rebounding. And that's something that's become somewhat of a pattern, unfortunately, for Trace as well. I think he's vastly improved some of his moves. His spin move is absolutely killer. He's been really, really aggressive this year in defending the rim and blocking shots and disrupting shots. We've seen Trace do a lot of flexing on a lot of inferior opponents. Whereas when and I mean literal flexing, whereas when you see him go up against somebody who is a big, strong, competing body, it's not just a product of height, but somebody that's willing to body up and bang with them. Trace can be easily disrupted. And that's something that I would imagine NBA scouts are paying attention to right now, because quite honestly, everybody, whether it's in the G League or the NBA, that's playing in the post is big and there to bang. And Trace cannot see the drop off in his effectiveness when he's faced with those type of players, because quite frankly, this is a league that's chock full of them. There's going to be a lot of banging for the remainder of the season. He's got to find a way to play through it and get his, and at the same time keep his teammates involved, because as we're seeing, there's a myriad of defensive schemes being thrown at him right now. They've got to find a way to read and react to that effectively as the season goes forward, because this team, we all know it's going to ride or die with Trace, but you've got to have more production from the other guys on the floor. It can't just be the Trace show. He is not John, what's his name? Johnny Davis. He's not quite capable enough of carrying the team solo when nobody else shows up or is sitting on the bench with fouls.
Well, I mean, he did that in the Marshall game, right? But that was Marshall. But I think too, like I noticed, Chronic, there was one play where, and they kind of had a mashup on Lee, where they kind of faced him up a little bit, and he stepped out, and he just kind of drove by him and blew by him. And I don't understand why they're completely wed, especially when you have a physical mismatch with a guy like Carrar, of just him playing back to the basket. I mean, just have him face up a little bit, and you could probably generate. Let him use his athleticism. You could probably generate a little more that way than just have him, parked in the post against a bigger opponent like Harrar. I just like it. That's something that I don't always get when they're facing, bigger bigs like a Miles Johnson too last year, for example.
Well, one thing I think that maybe plays into that, I would love to see some advanced stats, some synergy stats on Trace's effectiveness when he has to take more than one or two dribbles in order to get to the rim. I'm not saying he's not capable of doing it. We've just seen, I don't want to say repeatedly. Well, repeatedly, we've seen Trace can struggle. The further out he is from the basket, I think the lower his effectiveness becomes. And I think part of that too is spacing. Though you've seen a lot of those instances where he's been set up a little further up the lane than what he would normally like to, and it's one thing to have a double collapse down on him. It's an entirely another thing when the double team is coming from a guy that's only a couple feet away from him. I think that's just reflective of some of the spacing issues Indiana continues to have, and I think we saw that on display in some of those turnovers where they do get the ball to him, but there's just way too much traffic, way too many guys stripping around him in order for him to be really effective and get himself into a position where he can play more of that face-up game.
Yeah, my point is he's been here 3 years. Why hasn't that been developed? That's and that's part of the point too. And some of that's probably on him, and some of that's probably on the coaching staffs, or putting in that work over the summer that you need to put in to become a more well-rounded player. I mean, everyone, and we've seen this in the NBA, where you don't have schoolwork, but you've got to add to your game every year. And Trace isn't doing that, and the coaching staff isn't doing that. And that, to me, is what's part of what's holding this team back, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would extend that even further. I mean, how many times do you see Indiana pass the ball to a guy that's in motion, as opposed to passing the ball to a guy who's stationary? Not counting the the weave handoffs at the top of the key or on the perimeter. Again, it's ball movement, it's motion, and it's spacing, and we've seen them lacking in that here recently, at least against top opponents. And that's one thing I've seen quite a bit here in the last week. You're starting to see maybe the effects of a diet that was built so heavily on cupcakes to start the year.
Absolutely. Chronic, appreciate you, brother, as always, and glad everything's going well. Happy New Year, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Happy New Year, fellas. We'll see you next week.